My father is a strong, healthy man who has seen a lot in his long life. That evening, he returned from work around 3 in the morning. When he stepped across the threshold of our apartment, I barely recognized him. His face was pale as a corpse's. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to take off his shoes, and his eyes were filled with anxiety and even fear. If this had happened 7 years ago, I wouldn't have been surprised, because back then, he had just started his unusual job at the city crematorium. During his first years, he struggled with each workday, witnessing people's grief and tears. He would come home depressed, sometimes barely holding back tears himself. Over dinner, downing a shot of vodka, he would tell us about his work, how he cremated infants, how the relatives of the deceased looked, how they stood in the mourning hall with vacant gazes, having seemingly cried all the tears they could for years to come. What my father feared most was looking through the special viewing window of the furnace, where each coffin vanished in the flames. But as they say, people get used to anything, and my father was no exception. Over time, he stopped reacting as intensely, and cremating people became just another routine job, like cooking for a chef or repairing cars for a mechanic. Why he chose such a profession is another story, but circumstances had worked out that way. And so, that night, he came home. I was still awake and saw him the moment he walked in. "Dad, what happened?" My father glanced at me briefly, said nothing, finally took off his sneakers, and silently walked into the kitchen. "It's fine," he muttered under his breath. "It's all fine. Happens." But I wasn't an idiot. I knew right away that something had happened. Problems at work. My father realized he couldn't hide the truth. He silently took a bottle of vodka from the fridge, poured himself a full shot, and downed it in one go, sniffing his sleeve. In recent years, he had almost stopped drinking after work, unlike in the beginning, when he had just started. My mother and I knew, if my father reached for a bottle, something serious had happened. At that moment, my mother woke up too, as if she had sensed that something was wrong. "Why are you so late?" she murmured sleepily, stepping into the kitchen. My father clearly wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. His eyes darted around, his tongue was tied. Mom grew worried. "What's wrong with you? You don't look like yourself." She noticed the bottle on the table and understood everything. Yes, the reason was work. But what my mother and I heard next didn't fit the definition of work problems at all. "A woman came to us today," my father began. She had booked a cremation in advance over the phone, as required, and came in person during the day. The director confirmed the booking. The girl who was to be cremated was young, beautiful. She should have had her whole life ahead of her, raising children. But fate had decided otherwise. Her mother, however, seemed strange. She kept rushing us, asking if we could speed up the process. We explained that we first needed to settle all the paperwork before we could proceed with the cremation. My job is to press a button and monitor the temperature. I don't make any decisions. But the woman insisted, wanting us to burn the body immediately. I tried to explain that it wasn't up to me. She even offered money, extra payment to hurry things along. But my steady salary was worth more to me than a one-time bonus. I refused. Once, twice. The third time, She looked at me in a way that sent a chill down my spine. Deceased person into the furnace. By evening, they brought the coffin. Although calling it a coffin was a stretch, it was more like a simple wooden box, hastily nailed together from cheap planks. In 7 years of work, I had seen all kinds of things. Not everyone can afford an expensive coffin. After all, what difference does it make? It'll burn anyway. The important thing is that the body was delivered. But as I stood nearby, I noticed a smell. Faint, but there. According to protocol, we must inspect every body before cremation, just in case. The coffin was unloaded, and I approached. It was nailed shut, the nails driven in tight. "Excuse me," I said to the woman. Inside lay a young girl. I checked the face against the photograph. It was her. Some parts of her body had already begun decomposing, and stepped outside for a smoke. Jack, who didn't smoke, stayed inside. Less than a minute later, he came running out, looking horrified. That was already charred, but there was no fire. Everything was smoldering. The wood was smoking, but not burning. "What's in there?" Jack asked. "I don't know. The furnace is working fine, but it should have burned down by now." I double-checked everything and restarted the process. The furnace hummed. Tongues of flame flared up. "Strange," Jack muttered. "Just the equipment. Sometimes it acts up. It's been working like clockwork for years, and now it suddenly starts breaking down." Not even 5 minutes passed before it happened again. The coffin still hadn't burned, and the furnace shut off once more. We decided to take it out, heat the chamber to the maximum, and try again. The furnace fired up properly. Flames engulfed the wooden box. I didn't step away from the window, watching closely to make sure the fire didn't go out. Everything was fine, until I saw a hand move inside the coffin. I must have imagined it. Probably just rigor mortis, post-mortem spasms. But when the furnace shut off again, and the red warning light lit up, "Something alive in there," I exhaled. "Wait, are you sure you haven't been drinking at work?" Mom didn't believe me. I could barely believe what I was saying myself. I struggled to process my father's story. "Are you stupid or something?" he grumbled irritably. "I don't drink at work at all." "I believe you, I do." I quickly nodded. "Keep going, Dad." It was staring at me through the window. A real devil, I swear to God. I listened, and a chill ran down. Immediately dismissed any thoughts of Photoshop or editing. Dad barely knew how to use his phone, and neither did his coworker Jack. And why the hell would he fake something like this at work? I recognized the cremation furnace. I saw my father's terrified reflection holding the phone. It was real. I already understood that it was all true, and I kept listening. "What the hell is that?" Jack screamed. And at that very moment, the face disappeared from the window. And in that instant, a scream came from inside the furnace. "Honestly, I thought I was going to shit my pants right there in the machine room," my father muttered, pouring himself another shot of vodka and downing it in one gulp. Was it a human scream?" I asked quietly. "Worse." "What do you mean?" "Imagine the roar of a steam train. Hundreds, thousands of voices screaming at once. And you just stood there. You should have God damn it. I made the mistake of looking back. It got out through the window, I gasped. No idea how, but it was standing there. Standing. And then, it started coming toward us. We ran for the exit, locked. The back door, also locked. Jack was panicking, running back and forth, and so was I. Who the fuck locked the doors? Where are the keys? I screamed. In the machine room. Jack went pale. It felt like a blade slicing my throat. What do we do? He was barely able to string words together. The only thing we could think of was to hide in the storage closet. Thank God it wasn't locked. We ducked inside, barricading the door with whatever we could find. And that thing, it was walking down the corridor, its footsteps, heavy, dragging. It passed by. We barely breathed. We have to run, I whispered. I slowly cracked the door open. Didn't see anyone. But the moment we stepped out, its split in half head appeared from around the corner. We bolted as fast as we could. Where to? Jack gasped. The windows. No one thought about the keys anymore. We just ran, blindly, without thinking. A window. I threw it open and jumped. Why didn't you do that earlier? Mom gasped. I told you. My brain just shut off. Dad shook his head. We jumped out. Jack landed badly, twisting his ankle. He screamed like a stuck pig. I couldn't just leave him. Dad exhaled hoarsely. I lifted him and dragged him, like a wounded soldier. It just stood there, watching us from the window. I glanced back after 15, maybe 20 seconds, and it was gone. We put as much distance as we could between ourselves and the crematorium. We saw cars, people, and finally exhaled. I took Jack to the hospital. Then I called a cab and went home. That's horrifying, Mom whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. I stayed silent, watching Dad. Something was off about him. He kept glancing around as if looking for someone. His eyes darted nervously, like he expected to be watched. Mom didn't seem to notice. She was too engrossed in the story. But I saw everything. I saw how, in my parents' bedroom, an icon suddenly fell from the wall. There was no draft. The windows were shut. And I noticed something else. When Dad finished his bottle and got ready for bed, it was already nearly morning. He threw his clothes into a pile in the hallway as usual. I walked past, and then the pile moved. I looked closer, and I saw them. Maggots, white, fat, slick, 5 or 6 of them. I wanted to call Mom to talk about Dad's strange behavior, but she was already asleep. I didn't wake her. Tomorrow, I thought, if only I had known. I went to my room, lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about it all, about the photo Dad had shown me, about the ashes, about the crematorium. Exhaustion finally took over. I fell asleep. But it wasn't an alarm clock that woke me, and it wasn't my mother's voice. It was the smell, a horrific, acrid stench of burning. I jolted up from my bed. The apartment was filled with smoke. In the hallway, tongues of fire. I pressed my shirt against my mouth and rushed out of my room. My parents' bedroom was ablaze. Mom. She was lying there, lifeless, burned. Her clothes were gone. Her phone, her documents, vanished as if they had never existed. I burst out of the apartment and called the fire department. They arrived quickly. They put out the fire. But it was too late. Mom was gone. I survived by some miracle. And Dad, he disappeared. I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. Thankfully, I had a friend who took me in. Mom was buried the next day at the same cemetery, not far from the crematorium where Dad had worked. What was it? Where is he now? I don't know, but I have a feeling. That woman, She was in such a hurry to burn the body. Why? Because inside that corpse was something unclean. And when only ashes remained of that girl, it got out. And it took my parents. Although maybe it's still out there, inside my father's body, waiting for the right moment to do something terrible.